Join us as we dive into the history, hauntings, and high strangeness of the world to try to better understand the paranormal. I will be your guide. I am paranormal researcher and investigator Eric Freeman-Sims. Welcome to the Unseen Paranormal Podcast. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Unseen Paranormal Podcast. I am your host, Mr. Eric Freeman-Sims, and we had a nice break. We had a great time with our Tennessee Haunts and Legend Expo. It was a success. We get to give $1,500 to both of our charities, to each one of our charities, so that's awesome. That's a win. And we're planning on doing it again next year. So if you miss it this year, come hang out with us next year and be on the lookout for those dates and vendors and speakers and all those good things. But thank you for to all the vendors and the speakers that came out and joined us this year, and all the patrons that came and checked everything out. And hopefully y'all had a good time. We had a blast doing it. A lot of work, but we had a lot of fun. Also, if you don't know yet, we have a brand new podcast where I'm narrating 3 stories every week from a different paranormal nonfiction author. And so it is called Strange Chapters, and it is available on Spreaker, Spotify, Apple, anywhere you listen to this podcast, you can find Strange Chapters as well. Also on YouTube. So make sure you go and rate, review, share, and subscribe so more people discover that show. Everybody loves the voice. They wanted me to do some narrating. So that's what Strange Chapters is about, me narrating stories. So please go check that out if you haven't yet. Episode number 6 is out today on Halloween. And then today on the Unseen Paranormal Podcast, we're returning with 2 episodes today. This first episode is a Halloween bonus episode that I recorded with Mr. David Race from the Monstrosity Podcast. We talk about how you get to start in the radio world on the Howard Stern Show and as a DJ, and how he started Monstrosity and kind of about that show. And then also the second half, he tells us about his paranormal happenings and stories and things that happened to him. So enjoy this bonus Halloween episode and check out the brand new episode, the premiere of season 4, which is out today as well. We'll be back every Wednesday after this Halloween week. So enjoy the spooky season. It's almost over. Unfortunately, Mariah Carey will be coming out of thawing here soon with, that fucking song. But all right, everybody, enjoy this episode. We'll see you next time. Yeah. So you got your start in as a radio disc jockey in the 80s and 90s, and you were on a member of the Howard Stern Show in the 80s. And so how did you get started to be a DJ and kind of get into that world of Howard Stern and some of these bigger shows?
Well, the fantasy of being a disc jockey started way before Howard Stern. It started when I was a kid. And what's weird is when you're a disc jockey, you start meeting other disc jockeys that were doing this too. So you thought you were some strange kid, and then you find out there were many other strange kids out there.
Yeah.
But that whole sort of world appealed to me as a kid, to the point of, when other 10-year-olds were outside playing Evel Knievel and riding bicycles, which I did that too. But when other kids were outside playing hide and seek and Evel Knievel and whatever else kids do outside, baseball, whatever, I all things I did, by the way, but I also spent a lot of time playing radio disc jockey in my bedroom. So it was just as common to find a 10-year-old me sitting in front of a turntable, with a CB or something, talking into it and like counting down the top 10 songs of the week, or changing formats to being a rock station and just, playing deep rock cuts and, like mirroring that style of radio. And
yeah,
like I'd race in from school at 3:00 and run to my bedroom and be playing disc jockey till dinner time. Like that was like I couldn't wait to get in front of a record player and start doing that now. And I'd record TV commercials on cassette tapes and play the commercials like these are the commercial breaks. Like I was practicing being a disc jockey. This is what I wanted to do as a child. I also remember I wanted to be a sports announcer. I would sit and watch baseball games and hockey games and football games and sit with the TV volume off and do the play-by-play into a tape recorder, watching the screen, and I probably have boxes of cassettes like that from when I'm 10 years old, doing things, any of those sort of things. So now fast forward to, when I'm actually starting to be of an age where you really can do these things. So that's me like 19 years old. And I go to broadcasting school in Manhattan at that point, and I'm going in every day to, because I was never a student. Like, I'm a bright guy, but I hate school environments. I hate I can't stand the structure of school. I just don't cooperate well with. I don't play well in school environments. I'm like the total class clown, acting out, disruptive, like one of the worst people you could ever have in your classroom. So, but broadcasting school really excited me. Like college didn't. The thought of college didn't excite me. Broadcasting school did. So I started going to broadcasting school in the city, and I was going in every day from Long Island, and at that point in time, I was a Stern Show fanatic. Like, Howard was doing mornings in New York at that point, and I would be listening on the train every day, on my Walkman. And I just happened to hear him mention one day in passing something about their intern leaving, and it was just an aside. It was like a throwaway comment he made. There was something like, "Oh, that's right. Now Gary's tied up with that interview stuff later. He's got to find us a new intern. Oh, yes, I'll deal with him about that other thing tomorrow." It was just like a passing throwaway comment like that.
Yeah.
That most people wouldn't have noticed, And there, to my ears, there was no real intern on the Stern Show. Like, there was no one I was hearing on the air as their intern at that point. I wasn't hearing like, it's John the intern. Like, there was no character that I was identifying like that they have an intern. But at that point in time in my broadcasting school phase, I was maybe 4 to 6 months into broadcasting school, which should be like a year-long class, and I was starting to look for internships. I was starting to contact like other talk radio shows, like regular AM talk radio shows, because I just wanted to start hanging around radio stations and learning,
Right.
And so I hear this throwaway comment by Stern that just, catches my ear on the train. And I'm like, they have an intern on the Stern, like, while I'm starting to look for an intern. They have an intern on the Stern train, and there's an opening for it right now. You never saw a guy book from the train to a payphone as quick as I did when I got off that train. Okay. I just remember running into like a 7-Eleven with like a $10 bill and saying, "Nothing but quarters. Hand it, give me right now. Give me 25 cents.
Right.
I wanted like $10 in quarters. And this, just the era of payphones. This is before cell phones. And I just started dialing their station, and I dialed and I kept getting the receptionist and asked to be put through to the Stern Show. And it probably took me like a half dozen attempts in a very short time. I'm talking like a half dozen in 15 minutes.
Yeah, just calling over and over. Yeah.
Right. And in that short time frame, that 15, 20 minutes, the sixth attempt, Gary got on the phone. Gary, now known as Papa Booey, but at the time only known as Gary. And I could tell it was him right away. And I said, "I understand you guys are looking for an intern." I said, "I'm the perfect guy for this. I'm in broadcasting school. I'm down the street. You need to talk to me." Like, I just was like, just real bravado, like real, like that confidence you have as a 19-year-old when you haven't been rejected yet by anything, and you just over the top with your ego. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I just, I think I just, laid down the law. Like, I'm the guy for the job. There's no one else for it. Like, I did one of those kind of things, And I just remember like beating him down, like in a minute, like him just like after about 90 seconds, like it started off, he was skeptical. And after about 90 seconds, him just kind of scratching his chin and going, "All right, can you be here 10:15 tomorrow?" Like, it was that, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I was there 10:15 tomorrow. And I remember Gary and Fred did the interview with me, that first interview. And I remember Robin walked into the room at one point for a second to get something out of like the office. They all shared one office at that point. It was like 2 desks in one small office. Howard and, Gary shared one desk, and Fred and Robin shared the other, and Fred, Robin, and Jackie shared the other, that kind of thing. And I remember Robin walked in like to get a bag or something. And I was like, just remember kind of speechless in my mind, thinking, "This is Robin Quivers just walked in,"
Right.
And through the whole interview, Fred Norris, who's a weirdo, kept playing guitar while I would answer questions. So they'd ask me like, how, where do you commute from? How long is your commute to come here today? And while I'd answer the question, and then like I'd finish the answer, and then we'd go silent, and then the next question would be like, so you're going to take the train each day, and then what? Just come up here by subway, and you think you get here by 5:15 every morning? And I start answering. Well, it was while I answer.
Yeah.
And it turned out that I end up finding out later that the main reason that Fred told Gary he's the guy is that apparently I'm the only one they interviewed that had no weird reactions to the guitar playing.
Yeah, it just gave me your answers anyway.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I end up getting a call to come back, I don't know, days later to meet Howard. I remember just Gary called me and said something like, all right, Howard wants to meet you and just, clear it and we'll see where things go from there. And he's like this. He goes, we still have like another couple contenders. You're down to the last three, but Howard wants to see, meet the three of you, something like that. And I'm like over the moon, and I, can you be here tomorrow at 10:30, that sort of thing. And I come in, and it's Howard in there with Gary. And the first thing Howard says as soon as I walk in the room is, "Welcome aboard." So something like that got across. It's already done. You're in. And I just remember Gary looking at him going, "Moron! I told him there's three." Like he wasn't supposed to reveal to me it's already me.
Yeah.
And something that I knew coming in the door that day was that Howard and I went to the same high school, and he's much older than me, but he graduated 13 years earlier than me, but we went to the same high school, and so we talked about that for like he knew that, I guess Gary must have told him. So we talked about that, and he asked me if I had this teacher or that teacher, people that would still be there that he had. He mumbled that he doesn't like this guy or that guy, and I just like I had a couple minutes exchange with him, but like it was on, like you start Monday kind of thing, and then I spent a year there, and I did end up on the air with them like almost every day. Like I was the first intern I could think of that was like constantly on the air. I totally broke that wall for them. And I also co-hosted the Best of Stern with Tony Pigg. When they were on vacations and stuff. So I got a lot of airtime there, both when they were there each day, and then also even when they were on vacation, I got a lot of airtime. I did a lot of the voiceovers for their daily promos. We always had like promos. If you didn't hear today's Howard Stern show, then you missed blah 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 blah.
Right.
Don't miss the Howard Stern show tomorrow morning. I did all that stuff, and after a year of that, they made it clear to me, Gary did at least, made it clear to me in the beginning that this would never be a permanent thing. It's not going to become, paid job. You're not going to make a career here, like plan on leaving.
Yeah.
And after a year, I did leave, and I went on to my first disc jockeying job of my own at a small alternative rock station way out in the eastern end of Long Island, almost at the Hamptons, where I did middays for a while. Like a year. And then after that, just kicked around to different bigger Long Island station called WBAB, where I lasted about 4 years over there full time. And I was at a station in Connecticut for a little while. I ended up in Philadelphia, WMMR in Philadelphia for about 4 years. So I was kind of all over the place, as a rock disc jockey.
Yeah.
And somewhere towards the end of Philadelphia, like the very late 90s, I started, really starting to flirt around with stand-up. Like I'd always had that in my head too. Like I told you earlier, I was like the class clown of class clowns. So I always had in my head that like stand-up is something I wanted to do. And by that point in my radio career, I was getting pretty burnt on radio, and I'd done enough live stage appearances for radio things that like I had the confidence to like stand with a mic in front of people, and so I thought like this is the time where I think I can start doing stand up. So I started doing stand up in Philadelphia, and I did pretty well with that, like quickly, like right off. It seemed like within 6 months of doing stand up in Philadelphia, I was playing like the prominent comedy clubs there. I was being mentioned in the Philadelphia Inquirer all the time and stuff, like that I'm performing here or there or here. And I know this is turning into a really long story, but during that same period of time, I met Jay Leno backstage at a show he was doing in Atlantic City, and I gave him some jokes that I had written for him that day. I knew I was going to meet him that night, and I looked at some, the news that day, and I just wrote like monologue-y jokes from today's news.
Yeah.
And I gave him like a typed up, 6-7 monologue jokes like that. Like if today, if you were doing a Tonight Show tonight, here's 6 jokes I would have gave you for tonight, that kind of thing. And I didn't think he'd read them. I gave them to him, and he's like, "Oh, I'll take a look at these." And I just thought like that's going to the garbage later today, And the next day, freaking Jay Leno calls me. And he's on my voicemail, like telling me these are really funny jokes. Give him a call back. And I called him back. It's a really weird thing when you call a hotel in Atlantic City and you tell them you're returning Jay Leno's call and they don't believe you. Right. And they put me through to his voicemail. They wouldn't put me on with him live. They put me through his voicemail, and then he called back again. And this time I reached him, and I told him, we got to hurry up because Letterman's calling. And we went through that he liked my jokes, and I told him I'm starting to think about moving to LA anyway. Like I've been doing stand up a couple years in Philadelphia, and like I've really always had in my head that I want to live in LA. And he's like, well, I'd like you to write some jokes for me, and and I want you to call my assistant Monday. And like that's a cool call to make. When you got to call Jay Leno's assistant and say,
right.
Jay's call.
Yeah.
And I called her, and she set me up with paperwork I had to do to get them jokes, and I wrote for like the next 6 months or a year. I submitted jokes that he used a couple on the Tonight Show, but by the time I got to LA, like maybe a year and a half, 2 years after that, like I wasn't really doing that had run its course.
Yeah.
But I did get off the plane in LA, and continue the stand-up thing, and did that for a while. And the stand-up found its way towards podcast because, as you've seen, every stand-up has a podcast.
Yeah. Yeah. Some of them are really popular. Yeah.
Right. So running around LA, I'm doing stand-up all the time at the Improv, and I'm, playing with every comic's got a podcast except me, basically. And it was deliberate. In my mind, at that time, you were talking about like 2005-ish, let's say. At that time, in my mind, I'm thinking, podcast. Like I used to be a radio guy. Like that's a backwards move. Why would I do that? Like I just thought like I already did that. I did that like for real. Like where you
right.
really like where you're in the union and like you're on the radio. Like why would I go do some show in my bedroom? That's how I looked at it. And so I just totally resisted it. And I kept resisting it. And then in about 2014, 15, that much resisting, I was at home one day and I realized that I have this unbelievable amount of knowledge of the whole Bigfoot universe.
Yeah.
From my own Bigfoot experience, from my own deep reading and diving on the Bigfoot subject. At this point, I'm like, at that point in time, I'm like 100 books into the Bigfoot topic. I've watched every show ever made about Bigfoot. They're all DVRing all the time. I'm like round the clock Bigfoot man. And I'm also into the UFO thing too. I'm in that whole sort of zone. So it occurs to me, what if I do a podcast that isn't just the David Ray show or the David Spade show or the whoever, insert comedian's name here show?
Right.
I was like, what if I structure it around that stuff? What if it's, comedians talking about Bigfoot? Like I hang that picture frame on it. You know what I mean? And so that came to me as like, I was like, that's a unique podcast. Like that's not the Joe Johnson show, And so I threw that together pretty quickly, and I did a total of 7 episodes of that over like 6 months. Within like 5 episodes, it had a TV deal.
Oh, wow.
And I ended up executive producing and hosting a TV pilot for it that was done by the guys who do Monster Quest. And we flew across the country and shot it. And I cast 2 other comics in it with me. It was the whole show was scripted out, like in terms of like what I think it should be. Not only scripted word for word, but I mean like conceptually what I think the show should be. I wrote the Bible for the show,
Yeah.
And we went and did it. It came out okay, but there were things that went wrong that are out of my control that just it didn't come out as well as it could have or should have probably. Okay. There was a marginal attempt to sell it. It probably came relatively close to selling actually, but it didn't sell. So basically we ended up with an hour-long pilot that didn't air. And after that, I was kind of licking my wounds for 6 months or a year and decided, what do I want to do next? And I thought, let me do a podcast again. And I want it to be sort of similar to the last one, but this time let's fan it out outside of Bigfoot. Let's go like UFOs, Bigfoot, ghosts. Let's take the whole thing into it. You know?
Yeah.
And thus was born Monstrosity, which has the word monster in it, and and the show itself is just like a hodgepodge that's all over the place. So it's a monstrosity. That name came. And it became Monstrosity with David Race. And I thought instead of comedians always as the guest, which was always the case, the other show was like a comedian and Bobo from Finding Bigfoot, a comedian and Linda Moulton Howe from Ancient Aliens. That's what the other show was.
Yeah.
This one, I was like, let me go broader in the celebrity zone. Let me go at actors, actresses, rock stars, and comedians. Like it doesn't have to be a comedian. I'll handle that part. And let's broaden out the monsters. To UFOs one week, Loch Ness Monster the next episode, that kind of thing. And so I it's sort of similar to the old show, but broader.
Right.
And I started doing this one in 2018. And it's doing really well. I mean, it's got an amazing guest list. I mean, every time I look at my own show's guest list, I just kind of sit back for a second, my mouth hanging open in shock at
it. Yeah. I'm kind of that way with my show too. Being huge into the paranormal and growing up with these TV shows. And now I'm talking to these people, on the podcast, like, and gotten to know some of them. And I do the same thing, sitting back and looking at some of the people in the paranormal world that I've talked to. They're just, 3 years ago when I started this, never thought that I would ever be friends with any of them, let alone, chatting with them.
Right. Well, it's a double whammy. In my particular case, it's double whammy because I do get that thing too. You're right. Like I know Matt Moneymaker pretty well right now, and some other people, and it is weird that I know him well, or other people like that. But or to talk to Bill Burns from Ancient Aliens and have this really weird, deep UFO discussion with him is weird.
Yeah.
It's like, but the double whammy with me is that I look at the guest list and I go, that episode over there is Daisy Duke and Matt Moneymaker. This next one is, that I'm looking at, when the list is, John Anderson, the lead singer of Yes, and Bill Burns from Ancient Aliens.
Right.
The other one is Peter Brady from the Brady Bunch and this other guy from, Ghost Hunters. Like it just like it's like a double shot.
Right.
Like, what is this show?
Yeah, and I love that concept because you get somebody who may or may not be into the paranormal. They're all in the acting world and in Hollywood and things. And so, I think that's an interesting dynamic too, because everybody's curious about the paranormal, Bigfoot, aliens, things like that. So to add them kind of in as a co-host along with the paranormal person, and them asking questions to me and curious as well. Yeah, I love the format.
It becomes a weird triangle. The weird triangle of the conversation. And some of these celebrities come in and they actually have a lot more to say on the paranormal front than I expect.
Yeah.
Either they have their own experiences or they're just really into it. Like they're passionately interested in it.
Yeah.
Other times they're totally indifferent to it. Like I almost am amazed they're there. Like it turns out they're so indifferent to it.
Yeah.
An example of that is Mike Damone from Fast Times at Ridgemont High. Robert Romanus, the actor, he played Mike Damone. He was a great guest. He was so much fun to have on because it was Damone. Like he sounds like Damone. He looks like Damone. You're sitting there in a conversation with Damone, but he had no interest in the paranormal stuff at all. So it was like when we got to the UFO guy or whatever, it was like he basically bailed out. It was basically like, all right, you talk to that guy.
Yeah.
That wasn't his baby. Like we went back to talking about Fast Times after that. Then other people they have like an extreme amount either of interest or their own stories that throw me off.
Right.
Like Shadow Stevens like legitimately told me he thinks when he was a teenager he worked for a family that were aliens, like the Coneheads. He thinks they weren't really Earth.
Oh, wow.
You know, Catherine Bach, Daisy Duke from Dukes of Hazzard, really into these topics, really into them. In fact, a friend of mine ran into her at a party recently, and she brought me up to him, and because he's a friend of mine, and he mentioned me, and she's like, "I love David's show." She goes, "Tell David I'll come back in and do a show anytime. I'll come every week." I mean, she's like really into this stuff. Yeah. So but it is really one thing I talk about on the show sometimes. It's no accident that I booked it this way. I've booked a lot of women on the show that were the teenage posters on my wall when I was 17 years old.
Yeah.
And it is the weirdest and coolest thing in the world when Lonnie Anderson comes walking in. You're like, what the hell is Lonnie Anderson doing here? Yeah.
Right.
Or Catherine Bach, or it's like, you're Daisy Duke. What are you doing here?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. How did you get into the paranormal? Because you mentioned that you've been into UFOs and you've even had a Bigfoot experience. So what got you into the paranormal to begin with?
Well, I mean, my earliest interest in it that I could remember is In Search Of, which I think is a common answer for people my age. I feel like everyone my age saw that show and liked it and made an impact on them. And I feel like I've heard people answer that way before. So that's definitely, I remember that being an early influencer on me as a kid. That show scared the wits out of me, but I couldn't stop watching it,
Yeah.
So there's the beginning of my interest. But then later on, I remain interested in those topics, those kind of subjects on television, become things I'm watching in the 90s and early 2000s, like if I see, a UFO Hunters or some documentary like that on, I'm taping and watching it. Those are the sort of things I'm watching. Okay. And then fast forward to 2007, fall of 2007, I'm on the East Coast to see Genesis on tour. That's my other passion in life. I'm the world's biggest Genesis fan, which is a recurring theme I mention on my podcast because it's Monstrosity and it's all over the road.
Yeah.
For no reason whatsoever, I work Genesis into every episode.
Well, there's worse bands to like.
Yeah. So. Yeah, I crowbar them in for no reason. Literally, I'm in a conversation with a Bigfoot guy and Peter Brady from the Brady Bunch, and for no reason a Genesis question comes up. I jam them in places they don't belong.
Yeah.
But I was in 2007 on the East Coast of Genesis at Madison Square Garden and at the Giant Stadium. They were doing two shows in that week, and that's where I'm from, the East Coast. So my parents had a house upstate New York that was like our weekend retreat kind of house. My father had that house he had the property since the 60s. And I remember in the 70s when I was a little kid, we used to go to the property all the time before the house was built. It was just this 55-acre property he owned that was on a mountain in the country, that you just would go and visit the mountain. It was a very odd vacation life I had as a child. We'd go just visit our mountain. And just he and I would just be kind of walking through this pine forest, with sticks, with him telling me, watch out for any copperheads,
Yeah.
And just kind of standing there with him, looking around going, yep, this is it. He's proud of the mountain, and then we'd return to some flea bag, motel, a few miles away, cause we're there for the weekend visiting the mountain. And, eventually in about 1980, he built a log home on that property at the top plateau of it, and again, it's a 55-acre private mountain property, with the nearest neighbor a half mile away, and we're talking real rural upstate. Okay. So he built a house about 1980. So about 2007, my wife and I are on the East Coast to see these Genesis shows, and then we go upstate to join my father and his wife at the house for the weekend. And while we're up there, my wife is up on the porch looking through a telescope at stars and stuff. It's a clear night kind of place so you can see everything. And I'm watching her through the glass in the living room, and I see her just kind of getting spooked, kind of like stopping and looking left and right, like she heard something, and then going back to looking through the telescope. She's not like that, so it was kind of odd behavior for her.
Yeah.
And then she, I sit there, and go, what's wrong? Something going on? She's like, I feel like something's watching me. I'm like, what? And she's like, yeah, I keep hearing noises over there, and in that tree line over there. And she's not a Bigfoot person at all, and it's not the kind of thing she would ever say. Everything about that was weird coming out of her mouth. And she's creeped out enough that she comes into the house. I think she saw like a rabbit run by, like seeming scared. Like she just eventually kind of gives up and comes into the house, like kind of frightened.
Yeah.
10 o'clock. And then later that night, we're sound asleep, dead of the night. I'm 3:30 in the morning, sound asleep. And this house, remember, is at the top of a plateau on a 55-acre property with no neighbors around. And there's nothing there but us in the middle of the woods. And in the middle of the night, something pounds on the wall next to our heads, next to the bed, like next to the windowsill. Something pounds on the wall so hard that like a freight train hitting a wall. I mean, like boom, boom, like a couple poundings.
Yeah.
And we jump up out of a dead sleep, like you're talking about you're woken out of the deadest part of your sleep. We jump up, both of us, and look at each other like, what the hell? And she looks at me and I look at her, and we're so tired that for some reason, I still think this is like God protecting me from what would have happened, because I would have been unconscious still, having fainted on the floor in that room. Instead of standing up and like peeking through Venetian blinds or something, we both kind of look at each other and just fall back down to sleep. Like, oh, I'm too tired. Just don't care. Throw our heads back down. Had we opened the blinds right next to our heads at that point, I am positive we'd have been face to face with a Bigfoot.
Yeah.
Because that window where the pounding was like 10 feet off the ground.
Wow.
And there's nothing there to pound into the window, like
right.
into the wall, and any human that would have done that would be standing there with an arm shattered to dust at that point. It couldn't even have been done that hard.
Yeah.
No bear would stand up 10 feet and do that. He'd also be laying there with a broken arm. If someone's going to tell me a deer did that, he'd be unconscious and dead, having run into a wall for no
right.
reason at that speed.
Yeah.
And what I later on find out from my continuing research into the topic of that, like at that point, that's 2007. This is like somewhere around the time Finding Bigfoot starts being a thing on television.
Yeah.
And I'm watching those shows. I'm watching Monster Quest at that, around that time. And I start hearing stories that are like mine, like people like in the cabin in Minnesota that was pounded on, or the cabin in Vancouver Island that, something banged on it. Like it starts sounding like my story, And then I start seeing like a Monster Quest episode about Whitehall, New York, and all the Bigfoot incidents in Whitehall, New York. And I look at a map and I go, wait a minute, Whitehall, New York is 20 minutes from where I was. And it's right on the same mountain thoroughfare,
Yeah.
And it all starts coming together like that this is what this is. And then I start asking my father questions about, you see anything weird in that property? And he's an ex-cop, ex-New York cop, and he's skeptical and doesn't believe any of that kind of stuff, doesn't think in those lanes.
Right.
But he gives me ridiculous answers like no. But then the next thing out of his mouth is a yes. For example, his idea of no was an answer that sounded like this, and this was a real answer he gave me. No, nothing weird. I mean, I remember one time I found a dead deer with its back legs broken, just kind of laying on the road that goes up the gravel road that goes up the mountain. But I mean, that's nothing unusual. A different time I found a deer. His neck was broken. He was kind of like hanging near a tree. But I mean, it's a deer. I don't know. Like he's answering no with yes.
Right.
and ultimately, somewhere within a short period of time of this incident and those ridiculous answers from my father, I report this story to the BFRO. I call them and report my whole story. And they had an investigator call me, and he interviewed me like twice, like once for like an hour, and they called me back like a day or two later for like another hour and a half with more questions. I was amazed at how detailed, how into it, the questions they were. Like they were like really like they're really into like exposing whether you're full of it or what else it could have been. Like they really don't mess around, those guys. And I remember in the second call, he calls me and he goes, "Was the window open next to the bed?" And I said, "Yeah, it was open. Like it was just like it was screened, but it was open a few inches, like to let cool air blow in through the woods, in October."
Yeah.
And then he goes, "Was your wife menstruating?" And I had to think about it. And like women always know that, like their calendars are full of circles and X's. They play tic tac toe with their periods on calendars.
Yeah.
So I went and asked her. I think I put him on hold and like walked down the hall and I said, "Were you menstruating during this thing?" And she looks, and she was.
Wow.
And I get back on the phone and he goes, "You had a male Bigfoot banging at the wall."
Yeah.
And now fast forward to more recent times, times after 2018, when I've gotten to know Matt Moneymaker pretty well. And I've told him this story. And he's gone and looked up the original interview with me in his own BFRO notes, like his investigator's notes from my conversations. So he's compared my memories that were fresh at the time, like what I told the investigator, like within a month of the thing, to what I've told Matt the story is in, say, 2018, 19. So he sees that it's a consistent story, and he's looking at the investigator's notes and thoughts of what I was saying on the phone back at that time. And Matt also concurs that that's what that was. He considers it, I forget how they classify their sightings, but it's like Class A is like you saw a Bigfoot, you visually saw it. Class B is like it was a Bigfoot, but you didn't see it. Class C is something else. Like there's different classifications. And he classifies that as one of whatever the classification is for. He thinks that was a Bigfoot, but you didn't see it eye to eye. But that's what that was. There's really no other good explanations for this.
Yeah.
And that scares the wits out of me because like I said, like I've said this on my show a million times. Like I love hunting for Bigfoot from my couch.
Right. Right.
Like I do not want to meet one. And had I not just thrown my head back to that pillow, had I stood up from the bed and like peeked through the blinds, I am positive I'd have been eye to eye with this thing.
Yeah.
And I think he'd still be trying to revive me right now.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I've heard so many stories of, hunters and things that have come into contact with them. And these people have, hunted their entire lives, and now they won't go back into the woods because, they got PTSD from encountering these creatures and some of the experiences that they had with them.
Right. I'm spooked out enough just knowing I was physically this close that we were like a wall apart and a Venetian blind peeking apart.
Right.
I'm freaked out enough by that, let alone if I actually had done that.
Yeah.
Like I seriously don't know if you have enough smelling salts to have gotten me up there.
Yeah, that's pretty incredible. And also thinking about the window being open, and if that thing's that tall, it could have just reached in the window, and yeah, it's crazy to think what could have happened. But yeah, people come face to face. And that's, I've been asked before, cause I'm a ghost guy, I've been a ghost investigator, ghost hunter, whatever you want to call us, for a long time. And I've been asked, people ask me, "You ever go hunting for Bigfoot?" I'm like, no, I would like to live, and I'm not really a camping person anyway. So going out in the woods where there are things that can kill you, like bears and mountain lions and things like that, that does not sound like a good time to me. And then, like you're saying, coming face to face with one of these things that are definitely above the food chain from us, that could just use you like a rag doll. Yeah, that doesn't sound like a good time to me.
Yeah, I mean, like you were talking about, it's perfectly logical. I'm sure many people would say, that the paranormal-ish stuff, like a Bigfoot sighting, is scary to most people, I would think. Okay, but I'm the guy that's even scared of skunks. Like I don't want to. I'm not interested in interacting with any of the wildlife.
Yeah.
I mean, like I saw a skunk recently walking through, the development I live in, and it was late at night, and I saw him like walking like across a driveway, like to another driveway. And I just my first thought, and this is like from like 50 yards, 75 yards away. My first thought was a scary, creepy little animal. It's like jet black, low to the ground, like walking around in the dark of night. Like what? Like that's like a devil's creature. Like what's it doing with it? Why is it so into the nighttime? It's just go walking by in the daytime. You won't scare me much. There's something about your attraction to the dark and that low, sleek posture you take, skunk, that scares the hell out of me.
Yeah. And then they have the stinky end that if they spray you, there's nothing that will take that smell off for days.
Yeah, I'm putting that aside. I'm talking about that didn't even happen.
Yeah.
I'm just talking about that weird, creepy, like that walk they have where like they can get under the fence. They're so like arched low, and I'm like, what is that? Like that's a weird lifestyle you're leading.
Yeah. Have you had any other experiences? You were talking about UFOs earlier. You ever had a UFO or UAP experience?
Thankfully, I've not had any even close interactions with aliens that I know about, like the way my Bigfoot thing was a wall apart,
Yeah.
But I did have what I think was a UFO sighting, at distance in the sky.
Yeah.
In LA. Probably about I want to say it's probably at least 5 years ago. I couldn't say for sure if it was 5 years ago, 7 years ago, but not like hugely long ago. But I know exactly where I was, and I always whenever I tell anybody the story, I always give you the streets, because I like the idea that like the audience at home can play along with the street view if you'd like.
Right.
Just follow me along on the ride. You can watch it through my eyes as I tell you this. But I was driving, I think I remember, on Victory Boulevard in Los Angeles, like in the Van Nuys area. I was driving on Victory Boulevard westbound towards Sepulveda Boulevard. So I'll give you a second at home to catch up with me on Street View. And I got to the traffic light on Victory, facing Sepulveda, pointing westbound. And it's middle of the day, weekday afternoon. I think I was going to a meeting with a TV guy or something. I was heading to like Burbank or something, and I was going via the streets. It was probably like some weird time of day where I thought the highway was packed up. And I'm looking from the traffic light, just glancing up in the air straight ahead of me, and I could see these silver glinting objects very high in the sky, straight ahead of me. Looks like basically above Burbank or something, like due east, straight ahead of me.
Yeah. Was
I saying westbound earlier because I was heading eastbound? So just in case I screwed that up before, I was on Victory heading eastbound towards Burbank. I was at the corner of Victory and Sepulveda heading eastbound. That's the correct answer. So if I messed it up a minute ago, there's the right version. So I'm looking in the sky, and these small silver objects are kind of interchanging positions, and maybe a half dozen of them. They're kind of, one moves to the left, other moves to the right, one moves past each other, and one moves, like kind of moving around positions from each other.
Yeah.
And they looked very high in the sky and very small, just glinting in the sunlight. But they weren't like helium balloons or something, because they were moving with deliberateness, like one to the right, one to the left, one past this one now, like under control like that, And I'm going, that's weird. And I knew my UFO topic enough to know like that seems like that could be, like, it wasn't like I'm looking at it like the way my father does with these idiotic. No, I haven't seen anything except for these weird glinting objects moving left and right. Yeah. But I mean, as a UFO-ish person, I'm looking at them going, that seems alien-ish to me. Yeah. Because I had that much presence of mind, but they were so high up and so small that, like, it wasn't like I could really make out like 100% that looks like an upside down, plate, with lights on the side. Like, it wasn't like that. They were too high. So I remember I made a right turn onto Sepulveda, and I parked my car in front of like a house paint shop, like a place that sells like, paint, for your house. that's probably visible right now in the Street View guys playing along at home. You could probably see if you make a right from Victory onto Sepulveda at that point, like within a block or something. There's like a house paint store like on your right there, and I parked my car in that parking lot facing east so that I could sit still, not in traffic.
Yeah.
And just looking east. And I continued to watch this for like a few minutes, and I called my wife and told her what I'm watching, and then I looked at the clock and realized like I got to keep going because I'm going to be late to this meeting. So I thought, all right, well, I'm still heading due east. Like I'm not going to lose sight of this thing. Just keep going east. I'm going to see it the whole time anyway. And within like half a mile of that location, as I continued east, I lost sight of it. I don't know if like because like you think you're heading east, but in reality, there's road curvature, and you don't know you're heading like northeast now.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's how I lost sight, or they actually vanished, or just it became harder to track. None of that is stuff I can tell you. I can tell you that I no longer could see it.
Yeah.
And later on, I ended up researching on YouTube. Like I described what I saw, and I looked for like UFO videos that maybe resemble like the sort of thing I saw.
Yeah.
And I found a handful of UFO sighting videos from people from other places around the world that were really basically what I saw.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome to correlate it with things other people have seen and filmed. And
right.
Yeah, kind of get that validation that, okay, yeah, maybe that was UFOs, UAPs, whatever they want to call them nowadays.
Yeah, I refuse to make the UAP switch. I won't do it.
Well, they keep changing what Twitter UAP stands for too. So
yeah, Twitter is still Twitter. I don't care what he wants to call it.
Right.
And UFOs are UFOs.
Yeah. Yeah, I saw one about 10 years ago, and this was at night, and I was driving on a side street in my little town I live in. And at first I thought it was, and I had my best friend in the car with me, and at first I thought it was just the reflection of like the street light, going across the windshield. And he had me stop, and we stared at it, and it looked like a flashlight in the sky, like about the size of a golf ball. And I'm like, that's not a, we're sitting here discussing this over like 20, 30 seconds. I'm like, that's not a star. Star's not that bright. Maybe it's the International Space Station or, something like that, shining that bright. And then all of a sudden it just zoomed off as fast as anything I've ever seen in my life. And it was just gone. And
that's crazy.
Yeah.
That's crazier than my thing, because that's really like hardcore, in my opinion. Like, that there's no doubt what you saw. My thing, I think it probably was what I say it was, but
right.
I'll admit there's wiggle room in my story. Like, my thing is, there are sort of other possibilities. I'm not sure what they are, but there's sort of other possibilities. And because they're so small in my sighting and they're so seemingly high up, I don't have a lot of detail. I don't have things like, hey, it looks like an upside down coffee cup or whatever,
Yeah.
Like, so because of those factors, in my case, like, I admit there's some wonderment in mine. Yours is none. Yours is like, I saw the thing.
Yeah. But also you got to take into account, LA has so many famous UFO sightings. You had the battle for LA where, they thought they were under attack and our military actually shot at these things. So, in LA, you can, especially looking up people's videos, you can find plenty of UFO stuff from LA, especially people filming from the hills.
They do weird stuff in LA too. That's not UFO, but they don't tell you, and it's weird that they don't tell you. I remember the first month or so that I was living here, I was sitting. I've never told this story to anybody. I was sitting in a restaurant in Studio City, California, and the restaurant was like on the second floor with big glass windows, like 11-foot kind of windows that you could see every direction, beautiful view of the sunsets and things. And I'm sitting there, and it's dusk, it's starting to be dark, and all of a sudden, like, this weird rocket kind of flies by in the sky, and like kind of seemingly explodes into this weird light burst of rainbow of colors, and like an umbrella kind of formation is coming off of it, like a weird like umbrella shape from the tip of the rocket after the explosion. And it's a lot of different colors in the sky, like red, orange, yellow, green, and white, and it's very high up, and it all happened very suddenly in the distance. It startled the hell out of you. Like, the whole dining room, it's like, what the hell? Like, like people kind of drop their forks, and and it was scary as hell, and it ended up being freaking Vandenberg Air Force Base, like, which is like, 90 minutes or something from LA, like, shot off some rocket test where they fired it into like an incoming dummy nuclear missile to hit it and like, prove that they can make contact and blow it out of the sky.
Yeah.
And so it was just, a rocket test, like a contact to contact rocket test. And they did successfully shoot the thing out of the sky, which caused all the colors and the things that I saw. Okay. But you'd think they would tell the city of LA, hey, by the way, at 10 to 7 tonight, there's going to be a giant flash in the sky, and it's going to look like the world ended. Like, do they have any concept that Los Angeles is full of freeways with millions of people on them who probably all rear-ended each other at that moment?
Right. A little warning would be nice.
Right.
Yeah. And so after all of the research over the years that you've done on Bigfoot and having your experience, you have two camps out there, and I'm pretty sure I know which camp you're in with Bigfoot being a real creature. But what do you think about, because you have the woo camp, as they call it, I guess. And I find that debate fascinating because you have stories of people having experiences that would say Bigfoot is supernatural. And then you have plenty of people out there, footprints and things like that says Bigfoot's a flesh and blood creature. So what do you think about the supernatural aspect of Bigfoot and those people that have weird experiences like that?
You're going to find it really strange. I don't think you're expecting my answer, because it's just not the one that I think from how you put the question that you expect. And I think I lean towards the supernatural side, the alien side.
Okay.
On the Bigfoot question, because I think that's the most logical explanation for a lot of the activity involved in Bigfoot sightings. Starting with that no one could lay their hands on one and find one and take it home with them and stick it in a cage. That alone pulls me towards the supernatural alien-y explanations.
Yeah.
Okay. The numerous Bigfoot sightings involving UFOs and Bigfoot's coming on and off of UFOs that have happened in witness descriptions point me that direction. The disappearing Bigfoots, the ones that, that literally appear to, in a flash, disappear before someone's eyes, pull me in that direction. And then I think the showstopper, the closer for me, I think, and I talked about this on my podcast a few times, is the Blue Planet Project documents that leaked, where the government, supposedly government documents where the government manual is talking about what alien species the government knows to be regularly visiting the Earth. And in their descriptions of alien species, they get to a description of something called a wadig. And they describe a wadig as commonly, understood by Earth people as being Bigfoots or Sasquatches, but that the government knows them to be wadigs, and it's an alien species.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And so, to me, that's the closer right there.
Yeah,
that's the book. That's the one that makes it. When you put the circumstantial things I said a minute before that together with that showstopper, I tend towards this is not as terrestrial as people think.
Yeah. And even going back, if you look at like Native American beliefs in Bigfoot, it's always been a supernatural type creature to them. Like they just acknowledge it existed, and they're going to leave it alone basically, and they can cohabitate, but it's still, there's a supernatural element to it with Native Americans as well.
Yeah. One of the things that's happened on my podcast a few times is that, I've discussed this sort of stuff with Matt Moneymaker, and like in his case, he seems to give some credence to the alien theories, that I'm espousing right now, and he doesn't seem closed off to that. But I always feel like I'm compromising his quote unquote Bigfoot integrity when I discuss that kind of stuff with him, because I think that he's viewed as sort of one of the preeminent Bigfoot purist guys, know, and I always feel like, am I hurting this guy's credibility with the Bigfoot universe to even get him talking at all in the alien lane? Like, but he always seems sort of open to like that. He doesn't seem closed off to any of these angles as possible.
Yeah.
So we've discussed that. Now, other examples of that have happened on my show where I worry that, sometimes I'm compromising not necessarily the integrity, but like I wonder if I'm putting someone's career in a weird position, is when I've had certain people on, particularly actresses, and had them doing things on my show that I start thinking, can their career survive this?
Yeah.
An example of this is when I had Jodie Sweetin from Full House on my show, and we played a game of F, Marry, Kill, which I renamed F Monster Kill, and I got her to detail for me, it ended up being that she would choose to have sex with a Bigfoot, and she ended up, I ended up asking her a lot of detailed questions where she ended up detailing for me, why she's chosen to have sex with a Bigfoot, and then I start thinking, sweet, innocent Jodie Sweetin in Full House,
Right.
Her career may have just ended on Monstrosity. And this has happened with several actresses at this point.
Yeah.
Whose careers have somehow survived my show, but I don't know how.
Yeah. Yeah. So what do you have coming up with Monstrosity that you can tell us about?
Well, new episode in the works now. I never reveal the guest until it is there, because it's another paranoia of mine. But there, suffice to say, there is a new episode being cooked as we speak. But I will say that the writer strike and the actor strike, particularly actor strike, have put a hurting on the production of this latest episode, because almost no celebrities want to do anything right now.
Yeah.
They all perceive it as a violation of the strike's code of conduct to be out promoting anything, which is a bit of a stretch in my opinion. If you're, let's say, hypothetically, for example, your guest is somebody who's big from a 90s movie or a 90s sitcom.
Yeah.
Well, that movie's not in new release right now. That's not going to the theater this Friday.
Right.
It's a TV show from 1995. I don't really see that as like big problem that you're on there like discussing like, yeah, remember when you used to be on that 70s show or whatever it was.
Right.
But somehow in their minds it is. It's making money for the producer.
Yeah.
If they promote even their old show now. So it's been very tricky during the strike to get the new episode up and running.
Yeah.
I think we're on the brink of recording a new one, but the strike's definitely not been helping.
Yeah, I can see that. But you have a whole back catalog that people can go listen to all your former episodes, and they can find those on your website at monstrositypodcast.com and anywhere you listen to podcasts. Of course, you're on Spotify and Apple and everywhere. If you're listening to this podcast, you can find Monstrosity with David Race for sure.
Right, and then we did another thing recently where we took all the old episodes of comedians talking about Bigfoot, because I always get asked about those. People love those. I mean, like the original show, the show that the first show I did. We took all 7 episodes and put them on our Patreon. So you can now go back and listen to all 7 of the episodes of comedians talking about Bigfoot on our Patreon.
Yeah, that's cool. For people to go check out how you got started in the podcast world. And
yep.
All right. Well, David, and people can connect with you on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, the normal kind of social media outlets. And you got anything else coming up? Any live shows or anything in the works as far as that goes?
No live shows. I'm hiding in my house right now, definitely. So no live shows at the moment. And the podcast, the new episode on the way. It's just this one's just taking a little longer on the stove than I wanted it to.
Yeah.
Because of the strike stuff.
Well, David, thank you so much for coming on today and chatting with us. I really enjoyed the conversation and diving into Bigfoot and your experiences.
Great. It's been fun.
All right, everybody. Y'all stay safe out there. Have a good day. We'll see you next time. Thank you for listening to The Unseen Paranormal. Join me next Wednesday with a brand new guest, and please rate, review, share, and subscribe on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you're listening right now. This helps more people discover the show. You can connect with me over on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or join us in the Unseen Paranormal Lounge group on Facebook. Until next time, remember, some of the scariest things are unseen.
You have come to the end of the line.